This is your weekly fix. I'm Smitha Nair. Last week, the Union government formed a three-member commission headed by former Chief Justice of India, Justice K.G. Balakrishnan, to explore the demand to accord scheduled caste status to Dalits who have over the years converted to religions other than Sikhism or Buddhism. The Constitution Scheduled Caste Order 1950 originally only covered Hindus. In 1956, an amendment brought Dalit Sikhs under the ambit of scheduled castes. In 1990, following a demand by Dalits who had converted to Buddhism, the order was further revised to include Dalit Buddhists. The Constitution Scheduled Caste Order now reads, no person who professes a religion different from the Hindu, the Sikh, or the Buddhist religion shall be deemed to be a member of the scheduled caste. It's important to note here that unlike in the case of scheduled castes, those belonging to scheduled tribes who have over the years converted to Islam or Christianity are recognized as scheduled tribes. Similarly, the other backward classes, OBC lists of center and states include OBCs from Muslim and Christian communities. Dalits have, for nearly 2,000 years, faced repression, been treated as untouchables, denied access to education, to property. So, reservation or affirmative action or positive discrimination, whereby a certain percentage of seats in higher educational institutions, in central jobs, in parliament and state legislatures is kept aside for members belonging to this community, was intended as protection against deep-seated, centuries-old discrimination, and a measure of compensation even for their brutal and systematic exclusion. Now to the issue at hand. Should those who've been historically disadvantaged and oppressed but have adopted Islam or Christianity, the tenets of which do not demarcate social hierarchy, who profess equality, also be counted as scheduled castes? To help us understand this complex issue at hand is Dr. Khalid Anis Ansari, Associate Professor of Sociology at the Azim Premji University. He is one of the better-known voices of advocacy for the Pasmanda community. Thank you for making the time for speaking to us here at Scroll, Dr. Ansari.
Thank you, Smitha, for inviting me. Yeah.
Dr. Ansari, my first question is a slightly longer one, so please bear with me. In its 2019 affidavit, as reported by the newspaper The Hindu, the Union government said that the original caste or community of Dalit Buddhists can be located, while that of Dalit Christians and Dalit Muslims cannot, since these conversions have been taking place for centuries. Further, the affidavit asserted that Dalits who converted to Islam or Christianity, quote, ameliorated their social status by way of their conversion and cannot claim to be backward, since untouchability is a feature of Hindu religion and its branches alone. To some extent, Dr. Ansari, we saw this being reflected in the reported statements of Ashok Bharti, who leads the National Confederation of Dalit and Adivasi organizations. He too said that the basis of reservation to scheduled caste is untouchability and not like OBCs, the social and educational backwardness. He said that our social and educational backwardness is a consequence of the dogma of our religion, which is untouchability. And according to him, those who converted to Islam or Christianity cannot claim to be sort of undergoing the same thing. Can you, Dr. Ansari, respond to these two broad contentions?
Yeah, so it's a long question, and please expect a long answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So both these questions about the location of original caste or community of Muslim and Christian belonging to the Dalit origins, and the second question of amelioration of social status post-conversion,
Yes.
and the question of untouchability as a Hindu phenomena or a phenomena associated with its so-called offshoots. Before going into these questions directly, I would like to discuss the background conceptual ground on which these two questions rest and from which these two questions emerge. And these two sets of conceptual discussions are one, the notion of indigeneity, and how it is related with the idea or the imagination of the nation, right? So Islam and Christianity, they are seen as foreign religions when compared to the Indic religions like Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, and so on and so forth. So that is the first set of discussions we need to now have. What exactly do we mean by indigeneity? And what are the kinds of exclusions and inclusions that are happening in the discussions there? The second question is obviously whether caste is a religious or a social institution. Uh, and we can have answers to the questions which Ashok Bharti and others are posing from the vantage point of these two discussions. So let me touch upon the first discussion. We have a long-standing academic tradition which ties religions to their geogenetic locations or their areas of dominance. So, for instance, Islam is associated with Middle East or Central East locations from where it emerged. Uh, and the idea is that this interpretation of Islam in these regions, the regions of origin, they are probably normative, they are the dominant interpretations, the correct interpretations, the essential or they constitute the core interpretations of Islam. And those in other regions are peripheral Islamic communities. So their interpretation, their imagination of Islam is peripheral. It is synthetic, it is composite, so on and so forth, but not does not have the same valence as the core traditions. And this is very intriguing because 50% of the Muslims almost live east of Afghanistan, with India constituting the third largest Muslim population in the world. This is very intriguing. So there has been a long-standing academic tradition that associates Islam with its Middle Eastern and Central Asian origins, and this is something probably we need to think about. When we come to the Indian context, there is this imagination of Pitra Bhumi and Punya Bhumi, and where Pitru Bhumi refers to the fatherland and Punya Bhumi refers to the Holy Land. So there is this imagination that Muslims and Christians have their holy lands outside South Asia or outside India. And usually Savarkar takes the blame for this distinction. But I want to stress that Savarkar was not the first one who employed this distinction, and he was also not the last one. So before Savarkar, this Pitrabhumi Punya Bhumi distinction is very strong in the writings of Orientalist colonial scholars like William Jones, from whom probably Savarkar borrowed, and it is also there in the writings of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, when he says that if someone converts to Islam, if a Dalit converts to Islam and Christianity, then it will denationalize these communities. So conversion to Buddhism is okay, conversion to Sikhism is okay, but if a Dalit converts to Islam and Christianity, that denationalizes the Dalit. So again, you see, there is this long-standing fatherland, holy land distinction. It is also legitimized in the Constitution in Article 25B, when the Constitution defines Hinduism negatively in opposition to those of foreign faiths. So, according to 25B, a Hindu is someone who is not a Muslim, who is not a Christian, who is not a Parsi, who is not a Jew. Obviously, what is the conceptual distinction being employed here? It is that of foreign and Indic religions. So, anyone who is an Indic who has the Holy Land in India, so they are supposed to be Indic and Hindus by default, legal Hindus, even when not religious Hindus. So at least the identity of Hindu, uh, legal Hinduism, that is imposed on all who do not belong to foreign faiths. Uh, now, this is a problem because to use Paul Gilroy's term, he makes a distinction between routes that religions travel and roots that they establish. And this is a very useful distinction. So, obviously, Islam and Christianity, they have traveled from certain locations to the South Asian context, but they have also established roots here. The first church is in Kerala, and the first mosque is in Kerala, and much earlier than many countries who claim themselves to be Christian or Muslim countries now. So that is the kind of history we are looking at. So it's a very strange irony that Muslims and Christians who are natives to this land, who have stayed there for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, but still they are excluded from the dominant imagination of the nation. And this exclusion is not only polemical, it is not only to do with Hindu right or left. There is a consensus, there is a constitutional consensus on this exclusion. And this is something that we need to think about. Uh, there is something more. So, religion is not only about spiritual practices. Religion is not only about a denominational faith or rituals and so on and so forth. Religions are also knowledge systems in their own right. So both Islam and Christianity, they have a very complex philosophical system. They have a very complex theological system, a very complex ethical system. They have their own take on what logic is, and so on and so forth. Now, it's very interesting because the Indian constitution borrows from foreign constitutions, like the British constitution, the Irish constitution, the US constitution, and we take pride in that. Dr. Ambedkar learns from John Dewey, learns from about pragmatism from John Dewey, and he's very open to international scholars in his writings. Uh, even the Sangh Parivar, the early icons of the Sangh Parivar, people like Savarkar, Edgar, and Golwalkar, they are borrowing heavily from German Nazism and Italian fascism. So, in terms of knowledge, uh, all our founding icons, they are borrowing from all so-called foreign traditions, and there is a problem in only borrowing or only acknowledging uh, Islam and Christianity as a knowledge system. So, so there is an issue of origins, and obviously one can ask, if you're talking about origins of a community, how far in history are we willing to travel? So if you look at the anthropological evidence, the genetic evidence, population studies, then obviously no one is a native. If we go back in time, the first people who inhabited South Asia, they were out of Africa migrants. And everyone since then has been an outsider, has not been a native, whether we take the Aryan speaking people, whether we take the Mughals, Arabs, Turks, Persians, the British, whoever. I mean, they're all foreigners, so to speak. So, my sense is that we now have to talk about South Asian religiosity in a different way and in a much more reflexive and open manner. Uh, and this discussion, which ties to the imagination of origin in a particular manner, is extremely problematic. It is empirically false, it is philosophically problematic, and it does not do justice to the immense Islamic and Christian contribution to how we see religion in South Asia today. I think that question needs to be opened up. So that is the first set. The second, obviously, is whether caste is a religious institution or a social institution. To put it differently, whether caste is a Hindu institution or caste is a South Asian institution. Uh, I would I would suggest that we need to see caste as a principle of social stratification, as a principle of social exclusion, as a descent and profession based discriminatory system, which is not contingent on religion. Almost all religions in South Asia, they have legitimized caste in their theology, including Islam. Uh, and almost all those who profess, whether it is Sikhism, whether it is Buddhism, whether it is Islam or Christianity, who say that their traditions are egalitarian, they practice caste on the ground because caste is a social phenomena. It is not a religious phenomena. Religious ideology is just used to legitimize that, and none of the religious traditions in India, none of the religious theologies are immune from that. They have all legitimized caste in one way or other. So that is one. And when we talk about untouchability, when we talk about untouchability, uh, then obviously we need to see untouchability as a social phenomena. And there are a number of Muslim scavengers who die while cleaning septic tanks. These are all Dalit Muslims. They face untouchability from their co-religionists and also from people from other religions. For example, take the case of a Dalit Christian. So the population of Christians is only 2% in India, and a Dalit Christian scavenger who cleans sewages, who cleans septic tanks, and dies because of asphyxiation, uh, and is humiliated in public spaces because of his occupation, not because of his religion. And Christians are only 2%. Most of the humiliation that he experiences is from other people from other faith tradition. And the same logic could be applied to Dalit Muslims. Uh, I mean, if you look at the data, April 27, 2022, Abdul Salam died in Bhavana while cleaning septic tank in Delhi. July 14, 2022, this year, uh, two Dalit Muslims were asphyxiated in Tripura while cleaning a septic tank. February 2021, four Dalit Muslims died in Calcutta. These are all manual scavengers, but they won't get the benefit of reservation, benefit of SC category, while other Dalits belonging to different traditions will get, even when they face the same patterns of untouchability, they face the same public humiliation, sometimes in the religious spaces, but also in public spaces. I mean, one goes to church or one goes to mosque probably once a week or a few times during the week. But most of the Dalit Muslims and Christians, they are out in the public spaces. They work as peasants in the fields. They work as manual scavengers. They work as cobblers. They work in the graveyards, in the crematoriums, and they face humiliation, untouchability because of their occupations, because of their descent in the public spaces, and sometimes also in the religious spaces, in the mosque, sometimes also in the churches. So it is really very strange uh, I mean, the way the question is posed, that untouchability is a Hindu phenomena. I think, I mean, there is immense empirical evidence to challenge that. Uh, Untouchability is a social phenomena. Caste is a social phenomena. It is a South Asian phenomena. Uh, and not only South Asia, I mean, there is discussion that caste also can be detected in other countries. For example, in Japan, the Buraku community, it faces caste. There are communities in Nigeria which face caste. In Yemen, there is a community of Aghdams, Muslim Aghdams, who are almost treated like Dalits. They have their quarters outside the main towns. So, I mean, caste as a principle of social stratification could be is applied is a South Asian phenomena, and not only South Asian, it can be detected in other uh, areas as well. So, after these two discussions, coming back to the question which is being posed, whether it is difficult to identify caste within Muslims, uh, it's absolutely
No.
wrong. Every Dalit Muslim and Christian knows his or her brotherly and caste, and there is no issue on that at all. The second question, uh, 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 the question of whether untouchability is present in Muslim and Christians, again, it's not a difficult question to answer. There is immense empirical evidence. On both counts, uh, I also see, I mean, there is, in the recent utterances of Mohan Bhagwat, there is a change. For example, he says that DNA of Hindus and Muslims is the same. So somehow this is interrogating this foreign Indic distinction at the popular level. And also when Prime Minister Modi talks about Pasmanda outreach, he is acknowledging caste within the Muslim communities. Uh, so yeah, so I'll stop here.
Right. I'm going to get to the Pasmanda question a little later in the show. Allow me to read a little from the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution. This is a 2002 report. So, I mean, and through the course of the program, our viewers will know that many sort of reports that have dealt with this particular issue have even provided evidence that speaks to what Dr. Ansari just told us about. So, this particular 2002 report has, in fact, acknowledged that a Dalit converting to another religion continued to face deep prejudice in social interactions. Remember what Dr. Ansari said, you're not necessarily talking about only co religionists of Dalit Christians and Dalit Muslims discriminating against them, but the fact that they're out in society interacting with everybody else who can very well, as he says, identify that these are people who belong to Dalit ancestry. Anyway, the commission said, in view of the fact that some parts of the country, particularly in the South, converts to Christianity from specific scheduled castes are subjected to crimes and atrocities as their exact Hindu counterparts are, difference of religion making no difference in this regard, the Commission recommends that the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act be amended to include these communities that have converted as well. Dr. Ansari, my question to you is that while the focus on all of this, and you'll see it on social media as well, has predominantly been on access to reservation, what has largely gone unaddressed is the fact that Dalit Christians and Dalit Muslims who face violence on account of belonging to Dalit ancestry and also exercising their agency to convert to a religion of their choice, so sort of a double whammy, find that they are out of the ambit of this special protection provided under by the SCST Prevention of Atrocities Act.
Yeah, that's a very important question, uh, because most of our time is consumed in discussing about reservations, but about the Prevention of Atrocity Act, which is very important uh, in addressing the quotidian violence that many Dalit Muslims and Christians face in not only South India, all across India, even. So, on that count, there are two things that I would like to say. So, for example, there is the Caste Disabilities Removal Act 1850, Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955, Untouchability Offences Act 1955, and Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians can approach these laws to address caste atrocities. So, if they can approach these laws, if they can make use of these laws, what stops them from making use of the Prevention of Atrocity Act? So, which gives them much more robust justice mechanism when compared to these earlier acts. In terms of the daily lived reality of Dalit Muslims and Christians, obviously they suffer violence, they suffer daily humiliation. Many titles, caste names of Dalit Muslims and Christians, they are hurled at them as objects of abuse. Their abuse, citing their caste names, so a Muslim Jula or a Muslim Lalbegi or a Muslim Mehtar, they would be hurled abuses using their caste titles. There is discrimination, sometimes discrimination in mosque. I was during my field work in Eastern UP. Uh, I visited a mosque where there was a tumbler kept outside the main mosque, meant for Dalit Muslims. So the other Muslims can could perform their ablution inside the mosque, inside the taps, and there was a separate tumbler for Dalit Muslims which was kept outside the main mosque. There's discrimination in graveyards. Sometimes it leads to open conflict. In Bihar, there have been a lot of conflicts where the lower caste Muslim bodies, they were trying to bury them in the community graveyard, and they were not allowed because they belong to the Muslim location. And there have been battles, there have been FIRs, there have been spectacular violence around these issues. In 2008, in Allahpur, the lower caste Muslims, they were elbowed in the Friday mosque in Bihar, in Champaran, which led to violence. And then they made a separate thatched mosque for themselves, a makeshift mosque, which was burned by the high caste on December 6, 2008. So these kinds of violence keep on happening. Uh, if you look at the Pusulars in Kerala, the fisher folk in Kerala, they are sometimes referred to as kafirs by the Muslims themselves. So you see, kafir is such a pejorative sense. It has such a pejorative sense, and this term is not only used for the members of other religions, but also for the co-religionists, like the Pusular Muslim fisher folk. In Lakshadweep, there was a recent confrontation where the Koya Muslims, who are the dominant Muslims in Lakshadweep, and these coconut farmers, these wage laborers who pick up coconuts, so they demanded for an increase in their wages, and there was a conflict there. So I think, and also a lot of deaths uh, in manual scavenging, and lots of uh, other sorts of violence can be recounted, but I don't want to go into the details. But to cut the long story short, there is ample evidence of quotidian violence, quotidian humiliation against Dalit Muslims and Christians from their own community and from the wider community, owing to their descent, owing to their occupation. And there is no reason why they should be kept outside the ambit of Prevention of Atrocities Act. There needs to be a discussion on that. And there is a very clear case for the delinking of SC from religion, SC category from religion, on the similar lines, just like the EWS quota or the OBC quota or the ST quota, which are all religiously neutral. So all pan-religion castes can be included in the EWS quota, in the ST quota, in the ST quota, in the OBC quota. It is only the SC quota where there is this discrimination on the basis of religion. There needs to be a rethinking on that. Smita, I missed your. I can't hear you.
I apologize. I
Sorry, sorry.
forgot to unmute myself. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm saying you've already sort of answered this already, Dr. Ansari, in a bit, but even so, I just want to reiterate for the benefit of our viewers who may not be entirely conversant with the fact that, this has been studied in the past. So, from the reports that I, in the course of my research and reading over the months, have been able to, one was the Kaka Kilkar report of 1955,
yeah,
which made a reference to the condition of Dalits who convert to Islam and Christianity and to Buddhism and, Sikh Dalits as well. The Ranganath Mishra Commission report and the National Commission of Minority Study that was headed by Mr. Satish Deshpande, I think the year was 2008.
yeah.
Now, they've all recorded what you are sort of enumerating for us, this continuation of disabilities despite conversion to a religion that is seen as egalitarian or is textually egalitarian. Even the Supreme Court, in when hearing one of the cases, I can't quite recollect the year, but I remember reading the report said that there is the fact is that caste survives conversion. But even the Supreme Court itself has said that there is not reliable data. Now, I want to ask you what you make of this reliable data. The union government, in that affidavit I refer to, has always said no comprehensive study. So these are the words one constantly hears: reliable data and no comprehensive study. Is this a tenable claim that to effectively make a determination on whether Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians need to be included in the ambit of scheduled castes, one needs first of all to come up with reliable data or a comprehensive study, and there is an absence of it.
Yeah, so you already mentioned there have been a number of reports by both the state and central government, Rangnath Mishra Commission report, Sachar Committee report, Satish Deshpande report, then Kaka Kalilkar report, early report, Kaka Mandal Commission report, and almost all of these reports have supported the claim of Dalit and Muslims and Christians to be included within the SC category. Apart from these official reports, there are vernacular representations. For example, Ali Anwar, the leader of the Pasmanda Muslim Mahaz, he has written two books. One book is Masawat Ki Jang, can be translated as Battle for Equality, again published in 2001 or something. It has ample documentary evidence of the discrimination which the Dalit Muslims face. The second book, Dalit Musalman, which was released later, 2 or 3 years later, it focuses especially on the question of Dalit Muslims. So there are vernacular representations, there are state reports, both by the central and state governments. Then there is a huge body of academic anthropological work now. From the early volume by Imtiaz Ahmad, Caste and Social Stratification in Indian Muslims, to recent works. I mean, there is no dearth of data as far as the government reports are concerned, the vernacular representations are concerned, as far as the anthropological, sociological body of knowledge is concerned. Uh, on that count, I don't think there is any dearth of data. Also, a counter question needs to be asked: when the Buddhists were included in the SC category in 1990, did anyone demand a commission of inquiry or a data set? On what basis were the Buddhists included in 1990? On what basis were the Sikhs included in 1956? There was hardly any study done, and we can go even back. So on both these counts, I think that's not a very tenable proposition.
Dr. Ansari, I can't remember it would have been nice if I could attribute this quote to somebody. This is an academic who I spoke to. This was not now, a few years ago. And I remember this very distinctly. And I couldn't sort of find his name again because it's not reported quote, I think, who said that with Buddhists, it was easy because he said 95% of Buddhists are Dalits. And that is a well known fact because those who sort of, along with Dr. Ambedkar, converted to Buddhism. So in India, 95% of Buddhists are Dalits is known. So therefore, there was no I mean, there was nothing to contend with there in terms of, whether, how do you locate the original caste of, members belonging to this converted community. That's not something you're in agreement with.
No, I mean, it's very clear that without a caste census, a comprehensive caste census, uh, almost all these figures could be challenged, right? So the last caste census happened in 1931, when the caste as a category was used. After that, I mean, there has been no caste census so far. So most of the data that we're talking about are basically guess estimates. So they are
Right.
guesses at this. They are based on sociological speculation. They are based on some sociological intuitive sense, and so on and so forth. Uh, uh, but broadly, one is very clear who Dalit Muslims are, who Dalit Christians are, uh, what their rough population would be. For example, it is generally agreed that Muslims would have the lowest component of Dalits when compared to all other religions, right? So Hinduism would have, say, 15 to 18% of Dalits. Christianity would have around 50% to 70% of Dalits. Sikhs would have around 30% of Dalits. Buddhists, like you said, would have 90 to 95% of Dalits. It is very clear that Muslims have the lowest quantum in terms of Dalits. So the highest could be 15%, which is similar to Hinduism, right? The highest could be 15%. And if it is 15%, so 15% of 14% of their national population, that means the population of Dalit Muslims, the highest figure would be 2.01%, and the lower would be 0.8%, which Satish Deshpande estimates. So it is very clear that the population of Dalit Muslims would be somewhere in between the range of 0.8% to 2%, right? So that is the range we are looking at. Uh,
Yes.
and for chalking out a quota or for inclusion, uh, these broad estimates work because that is how the OBC quota was chalked out. That is
Yes.
how all the process of inclusion of caste and communities happens, because we don't have reliable data on most castes because there has not been a caste census.
Right. Right. Tied to this question on the proportion of Dalits within these religions, the Justice Balkrishnan Commission has also been asked to study the implications of adding new members to the scheduled caste list, the implications on the existing scheduled caste communities. Now, Dr. Ansari, an assertion has been made that Dalit Christians are better educated and have more social capital and therefore will corner the benefits. Even somebody like a Prashant Bhushan appearing for the Center for Public Interest Litigation, he made the statement in July. In court, he said that there is an apprehension within the Dalit community also that Dalit Christians, if they are made eligible for reservation, they would corner most of these seats because they have had access to quality education in Christian institutes. Now, first of all, is this a legitimate apprehension in your opinion? And if it is indeed the case, aren't there ways to sort of work around this?
Forget the Dalit Muslims and Christians for a moment. Let us talk, since the scheduled caste quota does not have a creamy layer, right? So there are already voices within the existing SC category that some slightly well-off caste groups, the Mahars in Maharashtra or the Jatavs in Uttar Pradesh or the Malas in Andhra Pradesh, they are already cornering the SC quota at the expense of a number of other uh, uh, Dalit communities. So there is already this question of caste capital and cultural capital and domination within the SC category. Those questions are already there without the inclusion of Dalit Muslims and Christians. The second, if you look at the 1950, when the constitutional order was passed in 1950, there were around 601 caste titles within the SC schedule, right? Within the SC schedule. From 1950 till 2020, 70 years down the line, now we have 1180 castes within the schedule. So there has already been an increase of around 500 castes within the SC schedule between 1950 to 2020. And most of these 500 scheduled castes that are added have been relocated from the OBC category to the SC category without any increase in quota. So 500 castes, so-called Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist castes, have been added within the SC category without any increase of quota. So the population of Dalit Muslims is only 1% to 2%. The total population of Christians is not more than 2%. So if there is no problem in 500 so-called Hindu castes being added without any expansion of quota, where is this anxiety of inclusion of Dalit Muslim Christians coming from? But I understand. I understand that most ideologues don't approach the question of quota from the vantage point of social justice, but from very parochial, caste-based, individual family-based interests also. I mean, that is pragmatic. I completely understand. How to go about it? So the Pasmanda movement has been saying uh, that once we have the caste census, or when we have a more robust sense of data about different communities, then we could probably increase the SC quota and then accommodate Dalit Muslims and Christians. Or we can probably create a sub quota where similarly placed caste across religions could be placed. So in various sub quotas. So Pasmanda movement does not like a religious quota, so a quota for only Christians or Dalits. If there has to be a sub quota within the scheduled caste category, then it must be for similarly placed caste groups across all religions within all these sub quotas. So I think that is the way to go about it. One needs to enable a conversation on that. The case for inclusion of Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians is very robust. It is very strong. Now we have to find pragmatic ways of accommodating Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians, either through expansion of the quota or either through a sub quota or whatever works. I mean, there has to be a consensus built on that.
Right. Dr. Ansari, you speak about Pasmanda Muslims. Now, there also appears to be some confusion over who Pasmanda Muslims exactly are. Are they Dalit Muslims or do they come under the OBC category? That has been sort of unclear. You already said what their position is on the inclusion of Dalit Muslims and Christians. Just on the clarification on Pasmanda Muslims means what? Like, who do they include?
Yeah, so Pasmanda is it has a family resemblance with the term Bahujan, right? So Pasmanda includes the Shudra Muslims, the backward class Muslims. It includes the scheduled caste or the I mean, the Dalit Muslims, not the scheduled caste, because so far Dalit Muslims have not been included within the SC category. So it includes the Dalit Muslims who converted from, who belong to the Dalit origin. It includes the Adivasi Muslims, like the Bhil Muslims, the Gond Muslims, and Muslims in the state of Lakshadweep, who are all considered to be scheduled tribes, and so on and so forth. So the Shudra community, there would be communities like the potters uh, and the cotton carders, the Mansuris, the Ghosis, the Muslim milkmen, and so on and so forth. In Dalit, there would be a number of communities like the Mehtars, Lal Begis, Halal Khors, Bakho, Pamaria, a number of communities within Dalit, the Dalit category. Then OBC, SC, Dalit, and Adivasis. So Pasmanda is a term that includes these three communities: the backward Muslims, the Dalit Muslims, and the Adivasi Muslims. So that is at one level, especially when coming to the question of uh, neutrality, religious neutrality of the scheduled caste quota. One of the arguments from the Pasmanda ideologues is regarding the question of conversion, right? So there is anxiety that if Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians are included, then since Islam and Christianity are proselytizing religions, so probably the floodgates of conversion will be opened. So that anxiety, the Pasmanda ideologues have advanced two or three arguments to tackle with that anxiety, especially from the proponents of the Hindutva ideological spectrum. So, one, even when Sikhism uh, was included in 1956, or Buddhism was included in 1990, the quantum of conversions to Sikhism and Buddhism has been very low. So that is one. So even post convergence, people usually have a very strong relationship with their religious traditions, with their faith traditions, and there is a lot of inertia in terms of conversion. Not everyone. I mean, they have complex subjectivity, and conversion is a very difficult decision for a believer in any faith tradition. So on that is the first argument that has been advanced. The second, we have very strong anti-conversion laws uh, at this moment. Uh, and also, there is a strong public sentiment against conversions through allurement or conversion through force and so on and so forth. And the third point is that uh, uh, there's and this is something slightly complicated. So this idea that Christians and Muslims they convert the Dalits through allurement. So there is a counter question that is posed by the Pasmanda ideologues, and they say because there have been a number of Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians who have converted to Hinduism in the last few years. So this state policy of exclusion of Dalit Christians and Dalit Muslims, it is actually an allurement for the Dalits of Christian and Muslim origin to come back to the Hindu fold. And this allurement is a state policy. So, in that sense, the critique against conversion, against proselytization through allurement and force and so on and so forth, this is actually what the argument goes is given back to the state itself, that the state is actually seeking uh, implicitly to convert Muslim and Christian Dalits to Hinduism, Sikhism, or Buddhism, because they can only avail of SC benefits once they convert back. So that is the complex territory. And
Right.
Hinduism is now much more positive after a long journey from Vivekanand, Swami Vivekanand, Aurobindo, Gandhi, uh, and Upadhyay, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, and then the recent statements by Mohan Bhagwat. Uh, so BJP has the control of the state. There has been a lot of academic work done on Hinduism, on Hindu philosophy, on Hinduism as a faith tradition, and I think Hinduism is much more confident. It does not need a definition in a negative sense. There could be a positive definition of Hinduism. It could be much more. It feels much more reassured, and in such a context, I think that early anxiety about conversion, this sense of Hindu lack when it is always competing with so-called Islam and Christianity, that feeling has alleviated, and this is the right time to really start talking about this entire notion of convergence in a new manner. And
Okay.
Pasmanda ideologues they have been pressing for that conversation.
So the final question, very quickly, Dr. Ansari. I read your tweet where to my mind, you seem to be calling out the hypocrisy of the BJP. On the one hand, there's this Pasmanda outreach. We've been hearing much about it, and the manner in which on the ground Muslims are treated. And you said many of those at the receiving end of this jingoistic sort of extended Sangh Parivar are these backward Muslims
Yeah, so the immediate provocation of that tweet uh, was Professor Rakesh Sinha's article, which was
in
published
the
a
Indian
day
Express.
back, yeah, in the Indian Express, where he talked that the minorities don't need to worry because of Hindutva and so on and so forth. And then there is this BJP MP or MP saying all kinds of, I mean, I don't know. I mean, so there was a very huge uh, a very problematic statement from him saying that Hindus should boycott uh, those communities, and obviously those is a code for the Muslims and even within Muslims, the Pasmanda Muslims, because the kind of occupations he mentioned, fishers, sellers of fish and meat,
Ready
Revdi,
jihad, as they have been calling it.
Revdi jihad, hotels, restaurants. Obviously, when we talk about restaurants, no one is going to boycott Kareem or those big Muslim eating points in Old Delhi or in Lutyens Delhi. So there would be those small roadside dhabas, which is usually run by Pasmanda Muslims. So, and laborers, the skilled people, carpenters, electricians, if you give a boycott of a call for boycott of these communities, they are usually Pasmanda Muslims. And that is what my reference was, that how long will this continue? So there is a positive rendering of inter-community faith relations by people like Professor Sinha, Shri Bhagwat, PM Narendra Modi. And then there's so many instances of violence and hate speech happening on the ground. So I understand that that probably because of a certain political common sense, some of these issues may be out of their control. I mean, some of these issues may be spontaneous because of a certain political understanding of the perpetrators. But at least there should be a strong statement. What one expects is at least a strong statement against these hate speeches and these acts, instances of violence. So that was the background for the tweet. Yeah.
Well, all right, Dr. Ansari, this has been an enlightening conversation. There is so much one didn't know, and we were able to sort of gather from what you've told us in this sort of longish, if I may, but I would say our viewers would be happy with the clarity they have got at the end of this conversation. Thank you for making the time, Dr. Ansari, for speaking to us here at Scroll.
Thank you for having me, Smitha. Thank you so much.